Hello and welcome to the CBB Supershow. I'm your host, Walter Waddell, aka Dub Deuces 85, and you know me as the connoisseur of niche sports. I like to dabble a little bit in that WNBA, the CFL, arena football. I like to do a little of this LOL from time to time, uh, dip in the tennis realm from now and again, but that's not really my thing. But you know what is my thing? You know what I'm really, really good at? You know what I love more than anything else? It's college basketball. I absolutely love college basketball. Eat, sleep, and drink that sport. And I got to tell you, man, I'm super, super excited that it is time. It's time for college basketball to begin. Oh, man, it has been a very fun summer. We had a really, really nice finish to the March Madness season, last year. Just a handful of months ago. Really good finish. Super jacked. A lot of stuff going on. We did a summer series where we previewed each and every conference, high major, mid major, low major. A lot of information during those. So if you're interested to go back and check some of that stuff out, definitely would appreciate that. But now with college basketball literally around the corner, November 6th, we will be kicking it off November 6th. For those of you who are not aware of what that is, let's pull up a calendar. November 6th. That's a Monday. That is a Monday. So that means we're going to be Halloween, trick-or-treating with the kids, doing your thing. And then you're like, this time next week, I'm going to be watching my man Dub talk about college basketball. We're going to be making some money, doing the green screen thing, and we're going to be having a whole hell of a lot of fun. So I'm super jacked. I can't believe it. So what we're going to do here is I'm going to give you some previews. Now in the summer, it was kind of a lot of speculative stuff, right? Like, hey, here's the transfers, here what the rosters look like, here's what we're probably going to see. Now we've got a lot of, these guys have practiced together. There's been some secret scrimmages. There's been some foreign trips. There's been some, guy injuries. There's been some trouble abound for some players. There's been some waivers denied. There's been some waivers approved. There's just been a ton of stuff that's happened since the summer when we talked about this last. So I'm going to be coming at you with 4 conference previews this week, tonight, Monday night, Tuesday night, Wednesday night, each and every night, 9 p.m. PST, midnight EST. If you can't watch live, that's okay. I don't mind. I don't mind being on here talking to myself for a little bit. If you're live and hanging out with me, you're a night owl, feel free to chop it up with me. I'll read the comments. We'll talk. You got questions about a conference, feel free to drop those as well. Or if you're just watching it on demand and supporting that way, I definitely appreciate that too. I always go back on demand and look for any comments, questions, concerns on that. This is my thing. I college football. I love college football. I just grind the hell out of that too, college sports in general. But most of you probably know me from college basketball, or you've followed me from one destination to a next because of this sport. So we are getting after it here. We're going to start with the Pac-12. Basically, it's going to be real low key. I'm gonna go. I'm going to talk about each team. I'm going to give some thoughts. I'm kind of run through the roster, who I think will be kind of relevant DFS fantasy options. Maybe give a, hey, here's who I think is going to win the conference. Here's who should be the player of the year. That kind of thing, to kind of get you ready to go. And then next week, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday at minimum, there will be wrapping up with the rest of the conferences, but we're going to fly through. We're going to do all the high majors. We're going to do a little bit of a mid-major show. I will have a guest for at least 2 of these this week. The ACC show, which takes place on Wednesday, I will have a guest for that, so it won't just be me hanging out talking. We will be chopping it up with some other college basketball personalities as well. Got to tell you, I'm jacked. So get your Ken Palm subs ready. Get your Evan Maya stats up. Get your Bart, Torvik stuff. Get whatever it is you need. Or maybe you just need the Super Show and the FTN Network and a sub to the Discord. And let me do all that other stuff for you. I don't mind. I will stay up late doing that part for you. But I am ready and I am excited and I am willing to be up late doing that work for you. So you support me, I'll support you. Hey, Jody, we are basketball guys. We are. Let me tell you, yesterday was awesome. Like college football, we definitely saw it well, kick some ass. We're going to start really hammering away at college football. But I got to be honest with you, man. I'm passionate about everything I do, but something about college basketball just gets me. Ooh, I'm just in it. I'm just ready to go. So let's get into this Pac-12 conference, though. The final iteration of the Pac-12 conference, it's going to be a weird one. We're seeing the college football season like the Pac-12, although it's starting to fall apart a little bit. Some of the teams are playing pretty horribly lately. But this conference has played really, really well to this point. It's funny. People are saying, man, why is the Pac-12 dissolving? They're so great. Well, Pac-12s have horrible management. They got a trash media deal. They've got, commissioners and powers that be that have just been pocketing money and screwing over the conference and the teams and everybody for years. And it finally caught up to them to the point where they go. So I'm happy about that as a Washington Husky super fan and a Pac-12 fan. I'm not sad. People ask me like, oh, Pac-12's gone. Are you sad? Like, not really. Not really at all. It's, get on TV that people can watch. I have the Pac-12 network because I make sure I got all those channels for this time. That's one thing that me and the missus agree on, like, hey, we'll cut back on this and that. You can do this and that. You can have your, trip to here, whatever. But you could leave me my channels to watch my games and my stream. So I got all that. But yeah, most people don't have the Pac-12 networks. They came and watched the game. So half the time that nobody knows anything that's going on beyond maybe Arizona, UCLA. Now with teams headed to the, Big 12, the Pac or the Big 10, like everywhere in between. We'll get a chance to have some of these teams and players get the recognition that they so deserve. All right, so final season of the Pac-12, the Conference of Champions, as Bill Walton always says. And I don't know how you guys feel. This might be a very unpopular take. Like, hold on a second. Let me get some Bliss sticks for this. Because it's a hot take. I got to cool myself down. So Bill Walton is just, he's not very good at calling games. And I know that's an unpopular take, but for me, when I'm watching a game, I just don't get into that Bill Walton shenanigans. When he first started doing it, it was funny and I got it. And I was like, yeah, this is different. This is cool. But it just gets so old. So old. What's his name? Dave Pash, when they do games together, funny dynamic. But that guy's like, he sees the schedule and it's like, oh yeah, I like this guy. I like this guy. Oh, man, Thursday night, Arizona versus Washington. You going to make me be with Bill Walton again? Oh man. So Conference of Champions, Bill Walton. I'm sorry about that hot take. Maybe a cold take to some of you, but man, I can't get into the Bill Walton stuff. I just can't. Couple of big name transfers into the conference. Teams reloading. Some teams just, really a lot of unknowns. And this is going to be the kind of the theme of these conference preview shows. And as we get into the season, you're going to hear us talk about it a lot. Like, usually I feel pretty confident and overwhelmingly like, hey, we've got an edge going into November because number one, people don't know, the teams reload, or freshmen come in, seniors go out. People take a while to get to know who's good on a team. Continuity. It's not like in the NBA and NFL, like, they've got all that solved, right? Like when I say them, I mean like the people that got the optimizers and all the computer stuff. And it's like, yes, this team does this and this and this, and James Harden's going to do this and this and this. Well, it's a little different in college basketball because of that turnover, and it takes time. And usually that first month in November, people that pay attention to college basketball and like watching it and looking at analytics as well, of course, but just knowing players, knowing teams, watching games, you generally have an edge in the first part of the season. And I always feel like that every year. But I really feel like that this year because there are entire programs that have had to replace 70 to 90%, some cases 99% of their scoring, not saying in the Pac-12, but just overall in the country, all, 300,000 teams. There are a lot of new faces. We don't know how player A comes in from this program where he's used to being an alpha. He's going to be playing now with player X who comes in from, this program. He was the alpha. How are we going to, coexist? Is this guy going to suddenly become the passer? Is this guy going to continue to score? Are they going to cannibalize each other? There's just so many unknowns. And it takes time to figure that out. And then as we get into December and early January, you start to see people, they catch up. They start to figure things out. They run their stuff, and it's like, okay, our edge is a little watered down. And then as we get into February, where we start having some mid majors on the slate more often, and into March, where people just don't know anything about these lower major teams, our edge shines through again. So usually November and March, like those are the two most profitable months of the season for me, and a lot of times the subs and people that I do this with. And I am really, really feel confident and passionately that that's going to be the usual for us, times like magnified by 1,000,000, because I'm feeling confident we're going to know player-wise who's going to get playing time, who's going to do well. There's going to be some who overreact to some scrimmages, to some foreign trips. There's going to be some who, hang on every word that John Rothstein says. There's going to be some who actually watch the games and have an idea. There's going to be some that have access to analytics but don't know how to process those analytics. Head's going to be spinning. There's just so many different variables. But I pledge to you, stick with us at FTN Network. Myself, got our guy Stills there in the Discord. And, of course, Mike. We got some sharp minds at FTN, betting-wise and DFS, and I'm just really excited about this. So there's a lot of turnover. That's the big shakeup, and there's some big players here coming into the Pac-12, and some programs like UCLA that just lost almost every relevant player to the draft. There's still some back, but they went out and, portal-wise kind of struggled. They got some guys, but they went the international route, so that's going to be another question mark. We've got coaches like Wayne Tinkle, who made a tournament run a couple of years ago, got a hell of a deal out of it, and they've just been awful ever since. Jared Haas is somehow employed. Mike Hopkins is somehow still employed. Bobby Hurley is somehow still employed. So there's some teams here with struggling programs that are very much on the hot seat. They're going to have to win here, because what's going to happen if they turn in a poor season? Hey, we're going to a new conference. Yeah, you piddled out, you fizzled out, you didn't do well, you had a losing year again. We're starting over. We're doing it without you. Wayne Tinkle, Jared Haas, Bobby Hurley. Please, Mike Hopkins. I would love the Huskies to have a great season and Mike Hopkins to stay, but if they don't have a great season and he goes, I'm not going to be upset about it, because I want Will Conroy to be the coach. So that's the Pac-12 introduction for you, and kind of a highlight of what we're going to do. Here in Kentucky, I may get 2 at the most West Coast games a week. Yeah, this is going to be great for exposure for these West Coast teams. The only thing that's going to be just tough at first is the cross country trips. It's going to be worse in football, I think, because outdoors, obviously going to cold weather, and they're trying to group them in pods to keep rivalries still going. But it seemed like the first schedule for football, a lot of the West Coast teams are getting hosed. But it also makes sense because they're the new guys to the conference, so I guess they got to pay their dues or something. Michigan got away with a really easy schedule, but we don't need to talk about that. That's sidetracked. I don't need to get sidetracked. All right, so let's start with – we're not going to go in alphabetical order. I'm just going to kind of go in order of how I've been looking. But one of the top teams here, obviously the Arizona Wildcats. That's going to be a squad that I think most people probably pick to win the conference. I know USC is getting a lot of talk, but we'll get to them in a second. Arizona has a ton of, high-level production to replace. Azuolas Tubelis, that's a big one. Courtney Ramey, Kerr Kriisa, who goes to West Virginia, as we know, and then a role player, Cedric Henderson. So that's a decent chunk of departures. There's other teams with even more than that, but that's in normal years, that would be really hurtful to a program. That would be hey, we're stepping back. We gotta retool. Maybe we got a JUCO transfer. We got these freshmen. We're going to be rebuilding this year. But with the portal and everything going on, you can retool very, very quickly. You don't have to wait like you did in the past. Caleb Love transfers to Arizona, first to Michigan. It's extremely hard to get through admissions and transfer and credits counting in Michigan. It's just really, really hard. So falls through, goes to Arizona. That's a big one. Kashad Johnson who is an all-around player, transfers in from San Diego State. Jaden Bradley transfers in from Alabama. I still think he has some growing up to do. And then they've got a couple freshmen from Lithuania because Tommy Lloyd, he knows his international scene. That when he was at Gonzaga, that was his thing. So he gets a couple of Lithuanians there. Motias Krivas, who looks like he might be pretty good quicker rather than later. And then a kid by the name of KJ Lewis. So those are the people that come in. The returners, Kylan Boswell, Pele Larson, Omar Balu. Those are the relevant one. And Henry Visar. Also, Dylan Anderson, who's a 7-footer with range. This team looks pretty solid on paper, definitely. Let me get up this box score real quick because they had I think it'll let me do it. Some of the secret scrimmages are not possible to pull up, so I won't be able to get you box scores from there. But Arizona had a recent game against Lewis and Clark, a non-D1, in case you didn't know. Should be obvious. And here's how it shook out. 24 minutes of play for Caleb Love, hit 3 of 6 3-pointers. That's the big thing for Caleb Love. 9 of 12 from the field, 23 points, 4 rebounds, 7 assists. Had a couple of steals. An all-around very good game. Granted, played Lewis and Clark, so we don't need to get too excited. We don't need to get too off our rockers here, but 2 things really stick out there. 7 assists, okay? And the fact that he shot 3 of 6 from downtown. Now, we know Caleb Love is capable of hitting shots. We know he can score. For whatever reason, Hubert Davis just couldn't get him to that next level. Struggled his first year, had improvements, struggled last year. Now they're looking to unlock things. And my good friend Forsty, who's a big CBB guy, he said, damn, there's a chance that Tommy Lloyd makes Hubert Davis look like horrible as a coach, because if Caleb Love comes out this season, averages 18 a game, knocks down he doesn't even have to knock down like 40% of his threes, like 35 to 36% of his threes, and has 4.5, 5 assists per game. Like, holy hell, yeah, gonna look at Hubert Davis a lot differently, because we know Caleb Love has all this talent. So that is an eye opener there. Granted, again, very early in the season, and that is a game against a cupcake opponent, non-D1. Also pretty eye-opening to see Keshad Johnson. Played 22 minutes, 4 steals. That's kind of what I expect from Johnson, to have these spike steal games. He's a good defender anyways. 5 dimes for him. Hit all 8 of his shots, one of them being a 3-pointer. 19 actual points, 3 rebounds. Keshad Johnson is somebody I think might be a sneakier player for this team. Jaden Bradley did struggle in 20 minutes. Only took 2 shots, though. I think he's going to be pretty timid on this team. I think that Caleb Love's going to dominate usage. I think Kylan Boswell is going to take a step forward. I think Keshad Johnson obviously brought him in to do some things. I think Jaden Bradley's just going to end up being a guy throughout the season where we'll be like, oh, Caleb Love's 8K because he's been doing it. Kylan Boswell's up to 7K because he's been doing it. Keshad Johnson's up to 7K because he's been doing it. And then you'll be like, man, I really want to get some Arizona. They have this really easy DVP spot. Like, I got to get some Arizona. The total's high. What can I do? Jaden, you're looking down and, oh, Jaden Bradley's, he's 4'8". Yeah, I can get Jaden Bradley in. And then, he gives you 5 fantasy points. You're like, why did I play Jaden Bradley? And then 3 weeks later, you're in the same position. You're wanting to play Jaden Bradley because he has shown us upside in the past. He's a highly rated recruit. He comes from an SEC program. He's not a scrub, right? I hope he figures it out, but I don't know. I just said don't get overreactive about a glorified scrimmage, but I am a little bit worried about Bradley, and I thought that prior to the end of the summer, I thought Bradley might struggle a little bit here to find his place at first, and really kind of finding a role that fits him. Dylan Anderson was solid in that one. Played about 20 minutes, 12 points, 4 rebounds. Let's see, the Yugoslavian kids, like I said, I think they'll be useful. I think those are guys that we can look at. And then a guy like Henry Visar, depending on what his minutes might end up being, he's a little bit interesting to me as well. But for the main part, this team, Balu, who it's worth noting, didn't play in that one. He's the type of kid that is, in this Arizona program we've already seen. We saw him take that big step forward last year. could 12 player of the year conference type of season. So he'll be expensive. He'll be solid. He averaged 14-8 last year. That was playing with Tubelis. Now you take away Tubelis, and those numbers, they're liable to go to like 18-ish points per game and 12 rebounds per game type of stat line. Like Caleb Love will come in and take a lot of that usage too. But Balu's going to be pretty uncontested in the paint, and he's going to have all of those touches for the most part. So he's going to be a big time player for them. You don't need me to tell you that. That's obvious. Larson, not really excited about him either. Let me just pull up this real quick. I don't know. I just feel like this team will be a lot of like Ballo, or we're playing in cheap Bradley, or we're talking ourselves into Caleb Love. And we might have in like an early season cheap Caleb Love initially. I have a feeling what they're going to do on pricing is they're going to be super stiff at first with like well-known names. So like a name like Caleb Love's going to come out and be like 8K, and it's going to be like, but there's going to be guys who fly under the radar and was like, wow, they missed that one, right? So that's something that we'll be able to pay attention to and pick up on right away. And you can rest assured that first slate's going to be analyzed over and over and over again. But we'll find an angle there depending on the pricing. Like Arizona, I like their chances. If Caleb Love is able to really pick up his shooting and he's dropping dimes like that, it could be a really, really fun season for him. If you're playing any kind of dynasty or season-long CBB, Caleb Love is certainly one to own there in a redraft style league, which I'm in a couple. If you guys are ever interested in some of those, I know that there's other people who are looking for more members as we speak. All right, we will move on from Arizona to another team here that's going to get a lot of hype, the USC Trojans. Obviously, bringing in top-rated recruit and Isaiah Collier, that's a big deal. Then you bring in, a son, a spawn of LeBron James and Bronny, and there's going to be a lot of USC coverage this year. That's pretty obvious. Even on the West Coast, teams, people on the East Coast, they're going to get a lot. There's going to be a lot of this USC program on ESPN, featured games. I mean, just get used to that right now. Key departures for them, Drew Peterson, Trey White, and Reese Dixon Waters. It's roughly over, 25 to 30 points per game. But bringing in Collier, he's going to be a big-time player. Bronny, if his shooting is good right away. DJ Rodman transfers in from Washington State. He's basically going to be in there just to defend a little bit, but to shoot threes. He shot almost 39% last season. They do bring back Boogie Ellis, who I love. Kobe Johnson, who remember last year, Kobe Johnson could have like a 7-steal game. He's just crazy with that. Shots are obviously going to take a hit. Now, he did shoot 36% from long range last year, which I think will surprise a lot of people. I think his scoring obviously takes a huge hit, but he might get a lot better looks playing with Boogie Ellis, Isaiah Collier, Bronny James. Be interested to see how that shakes out. Usage will also go down, of course, but depending on what kind of price tag we're going to have with him, he just does a lot in other categories besides scoring where he may still be valuable either way. Josh Morgan back. I'm never really crazy about him. I have a feeling he's going to be overpriced to begin with anyways. Between him, Vincent Uchukwu, who was back for year 2. Now, Uchukwu is our one of our favorite values whenever possible. Kept on trying to roll with him. He showed flashes. Imagine him in year 2, how good he could possibly be. Players who maybe you're not familiar with that run the team as freshmen, Kajani Wright and Isaiah Sellers, both of those guys will have to take steps forward to a degree. And then another freshman who's almost 7 foot in Renton Page. Basically, I love Boogie Ellis. I think that he will definitely be overpriced to start, especially because we don't know necessarily Collier and James, coming in. What's that going to do to his usage? Is he going to become more of a facilitator? Like I do think we're going to see, at least in the beginning in the non-con, some really cannibalization of each other with scoring. But I think as we get past the easier part of the schedule, the non-con into conference games, that's when I think the team will, inevitably Collier's going to hit a wall. Bronny's definitely going to go through a streak where he can't score, or the collegiate level guys are going to frustrate him. And when they need a bucket, they're going to go to Boogie Ellis. That seems pretty obvious to me. Somebody who is going to put up some really big games this year, and certainly deserves a lot of consideration as a potential first team all conference type of player. You look at last year, averaged 18 points per game, 4 rebounds, 3 assists, shot 39% from long range. Again, I think that surprises people just because this particular USC team last year was not paid attention to by the majority of people, and certainly not the masses over on the East Coast. So we're looking at Collier, Ellis, and probably a bunch of role player type of talent here, but guys who can definitely have big games. And this is where in the non-con, we'll see a big game from somebody like a Josh Morgan, or perhaps like Kajani Wright. And then as we get into conference, really have to reel it back in. One of the biggest things I see people slip up on in CBB DFS is non-con heroes. You know, they'll have 5, 6, 7, 8 games where they hit 25 plus fantasy points consistently. And then there'll be 7 or 8K when conference play starts. It's like, well, this guy's been killing it. I got to just, I don't know anything about this defense that they're playing in conference games because it's the first conference game of the season, but he's been so good against, Prairie View A&M and Colgate and, Washington State. They're a P5 team that, they've done good. And then they get into these games, where they play a Michigan State, a Duke, a Virginia, and suddenly it's like, oh, wow, they only scored 8 fantasy points. What happened? And then it's like, oh, wow, 3 straight games, they're under 15. Oh, man, they haven't done anything since non-con play. So be careful of what we refer to around here as non-con heroes. This roster certainly strikes me as something that could potentially have some non-con heroes, but we'll settle in real nice with Collier and Boogie Ellis for sure. But they'll be priced up and accordingly, no doubt. Andy Enfield, you also have to take into account that Andy Enfield is an exciting coach from Dunk City, but he hasn't shown me a whole lot. I know that USC, they're making the tournament, and Kevin O'Neill left him an absolute just trash pit of a program. But I don't know, Enfield, he's an okay coach, and he's got NBA talent. So, I think what it is he's a player's coach. And obviously, like, if anybody thinks that LeBron's not going to be chirping on his shoulder, telling him what to do, is crazy. So that aspect will make things a little bit difficult, especially if Bronny's not getting minutes early. But this is definitely for dramatic purposes, a program that we want to follow for sure. All right, moving on. Colorado Buffaloes. Colorado, this is the team so it makes it. You'll see the media pick Arizona. You'll see, the hype fans who are like, Colorado's the best football program in the world, and now they're losing games. That's how USC basketball is going to be. But for me, Colorado basketball it's Tad Boyle in his 14th season as the head coach. I really think this Colorado team is going to do some things this season. And they always have talent. And when it comes to fantasy purposes, they always have viable options. And it's usually not the first line guys, the guys who you're going to see as the higher price ones or the more popular options. It's usually the second tier borderline role players, or like the third or fourth option in the offense. Those are the guys in this program that you can actually make a lot of money with or do very well in your lineups with, because something about Tad Boyle's program really churns out productivity from multiple spots on the floor, but definitely those second row guys. It's their stars that seem to struggle at times. And we've seen the transformation of players like KJ Simpson last year, right? Was struggling. We had games where Neat Clifford would do really, really well. Julian Hammond would do really well. Javon Hadley had games when he wasn't hurt. Luke O'Brien ended up becoming, like, for 3 weeks last year, Luke O'Brien was one of the best DFS plays for his price, like, in all of college basketball. So you see that a lot with this Colorado team. Key departures being speaking of Neat Clifford, he's gone. Ethan Wright, Jalen Gabadon, both role players, and then Lawson Lovering, who good defender, big body, but he moves on. They do bring in the freshman Cody Williams, who I am extremely high on. Eddie Lampkin transfers in from TCU to play center. I think that was a really good get. and then Asani Diop and Courtney Anderson round out of the other freshmen. Returning Julian Hammond, a 33% 3-point shooter, averaged about 8 points per game. Decent enough when cheap, solid role player, solid like fourth option. KJ Simpson returns. This will be year 3 for KJ Simpson. Now, he did average 16 points a game last season, right around 4 assists and right around 4 rebounds, also about 1.5 steals. But he shot under 40% from the field, and he shot under 30% from long range. And he had really horrific games. At his price especially, he struggled a lot. That's like shouldering the load. He didn't do very well with that. He needed like a secondary guy beyond Tristan de Silva, who definitely took off. But he needed like either a scoring guard next to him or a wing that could get it done. He really struggled when it was just him, and he also was having health issues, right? So we gotta give him that. Like, he didn't have Jabari Walker. If Jabari Walker would have been on last year's iteration of Colorado, I think you would have seen a much better version of KJ Simpson. His assists would have been up. He would have found way better shots to take, and just overall would have been a much better player. I think that changes this year for KJ Simpson. I think with Cody Williams coming in, who is just going to be a freak athlete and somebody who I'm really excited about from day one. Be interesting to see, because of being a higher rated recruit, if they price him up super high, or what the plan is there, if they're going to whiff on him. I'm not hoping that they put him at 4K or something stupid like that, but also don't want him to be at like 9K, because then it's going to be tough to really use him. But he is going to be the real deal from literally day one. KJ Simpson, for this program to really win games and make it to the tournament, obviously KJ Simpson is going to have to show something. He can't have a season like last year where he just couldn't make threes and was taking up really bad shots, started turning the basketball over a lot, trying to do too much. So he's going to have to really kind of take a step back, and it's very cliche to say, but let the game come to him, because he was forcing way too much. But the good news is he has talent that he's going to be able to help share the load. Julian Hammond will have to definitely up his shooting as well. But Eddie Lampkin, him being around healthy, blocking up the middle, that's a great. Tristan de Silva is going to be able to play more of his natural position. Silva shot almost 40% from long range. So, as a stretch, he's a really solid option. Somebody who's going to play well over 30 minutes per game. Tristan de Silva, definitely, probably of the returners, my favorite player. You need somebody we're going to use a lot. Luke O'Brien off the bench, Javon Hadley, like, they've got those bench pieces. And I think there'll be times this year where those guys will come off the bench and have big games. We'll want to look for our spots, and depending on health and all that, but just know that the second unit on this Colorado team will be usable at times this year. But Cody Williams, that is the kid. That is the one to pay attention to. And probably, I mean, there's a lot of different youngsters and freshmen coming into this conference. Stojakovic, this kid's going to get a lot of talk, but Cody Williams is definitely the guy to watch. All right, let's move on to the next team here. We want to keep flying through the UCLA Bruins. Now, it seemed really dire. Like, when we were doing the Pac-12 preview over the summer, UCLA hadn't really added anyone yet. All they had done was lose Jaime Jaquez, lose Tiger Campbell, lose Jalen Clark, lose David Singleton, and lose Amari Belly. That's a ridiculous amount of production to lose. That's everybody from the starting lineup except Adim Bana. And he wasn't the best scorer in the world, right? And he was hurt all the time and really limited offensively a lot of the times. So there was a lot of replacing to do for Mick Cronin. And honestly, they kept whiffing on transfer after transfer after transfer. And I was like, man, what are they going to do? Like, they've got some freshmen coming in, but they're really going to go to those guys right away. And I guess they're going to have to. And they went out and they got a couple guys like the Slovenian kid, Jan Vidi, who is going to play a big role right away. Adi Mara, somebody from Spain that they're looking at and as getting minutes. Devin Williams, one of their other freshmen from America. So they're going to be giving younger players a lot of minutes out of necessity. Adi Mara, by the way, is almost 7'5", ridiculously large kid. I think the names that you'll know right now, obviously a healthy Adim Bana, who's going to be really, really important to this team, obviously, and just, he's just a youngster himself, but averaged the 8 points, 5 rebounds a game last year, over a block and a half, 68% field goal shooter. A lot of his work on the inside, somebody who's going to have to definitely stay healthy for this team to be successful. But he's a little undersized at 6'9", 6'8", so playing center a lot. But they have these big guys that they brought in from overseas. Lazar Stefanovic transfers in from Utah, 36% three-point shooter, role player, averaged about 10 points per game. He did have a game last year. Let me pull it up. You wouldn't believe me if I just said it and you didn't remember. But Stefanovic, mostly not a usable DFS asset, but he did have a game last year where he went for like 45, almost 50 fantasy points. Let me pull it up here. I think it was against Stanford. Yes, okay. February 2nd against Stanford. 26 points, shot 6 of 14 from long range, 6 rebounds, 5 assists, and 4 steals. Managed to foul out in 36 minutes there. But that was a huge game for him. He never had anything close to that. He followed that up with 15 the very next game, but 8, 9, 12, 11. Like, that was very uncharacteristic of him, but he got hot. And it shows that, hey, he's capable if he needs to play a bigger role, and he certainly will. He comes to UCLA with the idea of, hey, this kid's going to have to play 30 minutes a game, if not more. Dylan Andrews steps into a larger role. Dylan Andrews left a little bit to be desired last year, but he was a young player, right? And then, Tiger Campbell on the team, Jalen Clark. There was a lot of different guard options. So Andrews really didn't get a lot of burn until, hey, we were having all these injuries, remember, towards the end of the season. And as they got into March, it's like, hey, we got to start playing this guy more. And he went from playing like 3 minutes a game to 18 in the blink of an eye as they got into the tournament. He had to give them, 15 to 18 minutes in the tournament. And he was fine. He had like 5 points a game and 2 rebounds. So let's see, Asheville, 5 points, 3 rebounds in 18 minutes. Took 7 shots. Northwestern, 15 minutes, 5 points, 2 rebounds, took 3 shots. Gonzaga, overwhelmed, hit a 3, got a block and a steal in 11 minutes, but clearly he was overwhelmed. But they were close in that game, of course. So he's going to have to take a bigger role as well. That is somebody that I'm looking at. I feel like Dylan Andrews will make a step forward. I'm not super confident in him as like an every slate type of play, but I think there will be times where we can use him. And I think especially early on, we're going to see Dylan Andrews be kind of a trend to be a borderline non-con hero. Like, he's going to be really good in the non-con, I feel. But I also think he'll figure it out. I think the first couple of games of the conference schedule, he's going to get smacked, and then he will play his way out of it, out of necessity. Because, I mean, looking at their roster, it's really inexperienced. When your veterans on the team are Bana and Andrews, you got a young squad. Lazar Stefanovic is actually the oldest player on the team. Like I said, the Jan Vetty kid, he's a large guard. I feel pretty good about him. He's going to play a lot of minutes. They have a lot of scoring to replace. Point guard wise, like, he's one of those old school international point guards. He's got like a really good passing ability, like a little bit of a Rubio in that regard. He can't shoot very well, which is a problem, right? But they're hoping that Lazar is going to come in and shoot. Andrews to take a step forward, but Vidi's going to be a little bit of that Tiger Campbell role, I feel, where his offense might be a little limited at first, but he's going to do a lot of other things that will make him a viable DFS option, depending on price, of course, but somebody that we certainly need to look at. Who knows? Maybe Stefanovic will become a viable play, because I think he's going to have to shoot a lot on this team, surrounded by guys who maybe can't shoot. The other guy that comes in from Turkey, he was drafted in my dynasty league. Let me see. I don't want to butcher this. Let me get this pronunciation, because we're gonna have to say it this year. Berke Bayuktincho, and you wouldn't think that, because his last name is spelled Buyuktuncel. I even tried to practice this before the show so I wouldn't murder it. But Berke Buyuktincho We will get it down. He's going to be somebody that is a factor, takes this role. He was on the U19 Turkey team and led that team in scoring. Really like high upside, raw, of course, but somebody that I think is going to develop into a really nice play. I don't know that he'll have the time to really fully develop, and he's going to be making mistakes because of the youth of this team. There's going to be mistakes. And knowing Mick Cronin, there might be some guys who get yanked. There might be some times where you play a guy, he does like 3 boneheaded things back to back to back, and suddenly his ass is glued to the bench. So you have to be aware of that when you're playing these Bruins, because I do have a feeling they're going to come out pretty cheap. Still have Will McClendon. They still have Kenneth Nwaba. God forbid if there's injuries and those guys have to play again. I say this a lot for college sports, especially because like in the NBA, when somebody's hurt now, like you just play their replacement. If they're cheap and they're going to be the starter, you just replace them, because in pro sports, it's a 1-for-1. Like that guy's playing that position, he's going to put up fantasy points. Never fails. That's why chalk always hits. But in college, that's not the case. Like 1 + 1 doesn't always equal 2. So if let's say Dylan Andrews has a nice start to the season, and it's like, oh God, UCLA think they're saved. They've got Andrews. He's playing like Tiger Campbell, and he's scoring and he's making shots and he's running the offense. He goes down, and they got to play Will McClendon again. Like that's not 1-for-1. that's actually like you would almost rather just pull. I don't want to make fun of that kid. You'd rather almost like just play a stranger off the street in that case, because at least you don't know what you're going to get there. You know what you're going to get with Will McClendon, and he was formerly a highly rated recruit. I really, really wish that he could turn into something a little bit better, but this UCLA team, they're super, super raw. They're super thin. And I worry about any injuries or any ineffectiveness. So this team has as far as like bust potential on a slate to slate basis, and Pac-12 Thursday slates, like those can go horrifically wrong. They usually do. In most of the time, I think it could happen and go wrong because of this team here, especially if they're cheap or mispriced and the non-con is really good to them. I feel like that could be a real, real problem. Because youth does not usually win in college basketball these days. Why? Because the transfer portal, guys are staying in longer. DeAndre Williams of Memphis trying to get another year. He's turning 27 this year. He's played in college basketball forever. Yeah, he's probably not going to go to the NBA and be a big-time stud like this 19-year-old kid coming in will. But at least this year in college basketball, DeAndre Williams is going to stuff a 19-year-old kid in the locker. So UCLA might have problems this year. Let's just be honest. All right, moving right along here to a team that I absolutely love to talk about, the Oregon Ducks. Nah, just kidding. Oregon Ducks, man, with Dana Altman. Can't believe the 14th season for Dana Altman. I mean, I know he's been there a while, but Jesus, he's been there a long time. NIT quarterfinals loss last year. Golf clap for that, Dana. He was actually putting his own job on the line in last year, talking about, if I'm not the right guy, fire me. Like, there's really no excuse for a program like Oregon not to be at minimum in the tournament. When you got Uncle Phil as your guy, making these billion-dollar facilities and 18 million different jerseys, all of them ugly, shoes, all this at your disposal, you should not be going to the NIT. And if you are, you should certainly be winning that tournament. So a quarterfinals exit in the NIT, I don't think he can handle too much more of that. Will Richardson is gone. Will Richardson, he had that one really good year a couple years ago, and he just never really got back to it. It was funny because the industry took so long to realize, like, hey, Will Richardson's just not very good. Using him, slate after slate because, hey, he's priced at $7K. This is cheap for him because, you know what? 2 years ago, he used to put up 30 fantasy points per game. And I was like, yeah, how's that working out for you? And eventually people stopped using him, and he never got used ever again. So he's gone. Quincy Guerrier is gone, transferred off. Rivaldo Soares gone. Kel Ware gone, all transferred out. The key newcomers, or some that we need to at least talk about, at least from transfer portal standpoint. Cario Oquendo transfers in from Georgia. That'll be interesting. Jesse Zarzullo transfers in from Central Michigan. And then Mookie Cook, Kwame Evans, Jackson Shellstead. Those are all the higher rated freshman recruits coming in. Mookie Cook's got some serious bounce. Kwame Evans from Montverde Academy. He's somebody that is going to be a factor sooner rather than later. And they also have a transfer from a non-D1 in Jadrian Tracy. Keyshawn Bartholomew's back. Averaged 9 points, shot about 36% from long range. Like Keyshawn Bartholomew, he's a very solid, upperclassman for this team. Nate Biddle, 7-footer, he's back. And Fale Dante, as long as he's healthy, him being back, that's a big deal for this team. Very solid role player, and Brennan Regby is back as an upperclassman. So we have the near polar opposite of UCLA. We have a ton of veterans on this squad, and they're probably running a starting 5 without anyone being under a junior, possibly even a senior. We'll see what happens with these freshmen if they break in. I think Dana Altman's, he's going to be willing to experiment if it doesn't work right away. He hasn't made the NCAA tournament in the last 2. And if he doesn't make it for a 3rd, he might be out the door. He's usually a coach that you can count on to bring them to the tournament. So there's going to be that added pressure there for them to figure things out. Also, who replaced Will Richardson as the guy that's chalk all the time but not very good, Jermaine Cuisinart. Yeah. He's going to be a guy that I think people are enamored with once again. So it's going to be a situation where I just never use him, and I'm sure DK is going to price him at like $5K or something stupid, and people are going to be like, "This is the greatest player ever," and he's going to put up his 7 fantasy point game. But I do not look forward to having to talk about Jermaine Cuisinart this season. I am an Oregon Duck hater, but we can go back and look at times when he's been chalk in the stats that he's put up, and it's almost comical to a point. And also, he's going to lose a ton of usage to Kari Oquendo, who's a very high usage, low efficiency type of guy who's going to take a ton of touches away from him. And then you've got these freshmen coming in who are going to want to find their place as well. So as far as where the offense is going to come from, I think it's going to be a mixture of things, but I don't see a ton of efficiency here. I do really, like I said, like Keyshawn Bartholomew, but I think he might get lost in the shuffle for usage because of all these other guys. Really, the most intriguing fantasy asset here is going to be in Fale Dante, somebody who's going to be able to give us double-doubles, a handful of blocks, and anytime he's under like 7.5, he's going to be a very good play and somebody that we're going to be talking about a lot. As for the freshmen, I think we'll see all 3 of them play little early on and then get a chance to take over games, especially in the non-con. And if I had to guess which one that would be, I think Mookie Cook is out of the 3 the most ready to contribute for fantasy purposes. Evans is really good, kind of a freak athlete you can shoot. Probably the clearest path to playing time for him. But I do think Cook is going to be the guy that's going to ultimately be like the most exciting. What I worry about with him is, at least at the high school level, is he didn't have to defend, right? A lot of these guys don't have to play any defense. They just get to score 1 million points, and then they have to learn how to play defense. So that's the main worry there. All right, let's move on to a more exciting team, one that you could probably call America's team. I think that's fair. Playing on Montlake there in Seattle, the Washington Huskies, with the Heisman candidate, Michael Penix. We don't have to talk about how poorly he played yesterday. It's not necessary. We don't need to. The Huskies roster is awesome. Let's start with that. Mike Hopkins, he can ill afford a horrible season. And every year we can go back and you know what? Let's do it. Let's go back and look at some of the rosters that my Washington Huskies have had and the result that they ended with. And you got to go back to, let's see, Romar's last season which was 2017, 2018, around there. He went 9-22. That was obviously with Markelle Fultz. That season didn't go the way it was supposed to, but they got rid of Romar. I was probably the only one in Seattle that didn't want to get rid of Lorenzo Romar. I know I'm getting sidetracked. Just bear with me here. Hopkins comes in, has a great season, relatively speaking. Hey, look, they're turning the tide here. Then they go 27-9 into a second year. We make the tournament. We beat a very good Utah State team, get our just doors blown off by North Carolina. But it was like, hey, Jalen Noel, he's really good. T. Stiebel, like there's some NBA pros on this roster. And then something flipped. It was like, okay, this guy can coach. The talent's not dropping off. Romar's an amazing recruiter. Let's like look what he did in Pepperdine. Even he's like bringing in NBA talent. But Hopkins showed like, hey, got Jaden McDaniels, hometown kid, got Isaiah Stewart from way the hell over there in New York, and Nas Carter's on the squad. Jay-Z family related. Ray Battle comes to town, another local kid. Like that was a good team. That's a team that you would think is a tournament team. Somehow they go 15-17. We beat Arizona late in the season, which was the highlight of that year, but 15-17. Then we go 5-21 the next season. And here's like the talent that we have. Quade Green comes from Kentucky. Love him. Ray Battle's starting to come in his own. Eric Stevenson's on the team. Nate Roberts, really solid defender. Cole Bajema, like the talent that's better than 5 wins. Then he goes 17-15 after that with Emmett Matthews, who comes back, Terrell Brown, Brown was our guy, right? Dejon Davis, PJ Fuller, like all these guys who transferred in from other teams that were homegrown kids. Not good enough. Then we have a team last year. Keon Brooks comes from Kentucky because we got that Washington to Kentucky, Kentucky to Washington pipeline. Keon Menafield, who looks like he's going to be really good, right? Corin Johnson, who I still think is going to be an all-timer. Braxton Mia, Frank Kepnong, Noah Williams, and we go 16-16. Like he's had talent, and I know it's not championship caliber talent, but we should not be this porous. Now look at the roster that we have coming into this, and we'll start off with the guys we've lost. Keon Menafield, who heads off to the SEC. Sounds like may not play. Great issues for I don't know, whatever. Cole Bajema gone, transfers in conference to the Utes. Noah Williams gone, didn't work out with him. I feel bad about that. Jamal Bay is out of eligibility. PJ Fuller didn't work out for him, but him and Noah Williams, hometown kids, other programs come in, want to rebuild the program, doesn't work out. But we have retooled in such a way that we cannot afford to lose games and not make the tournament with this roster. I am very high on this roster. And keep in mind, yes, I am a homer, but listen to what we brought in. Start with the transfers. Paul McCahey from Rutgers. Now, we know McCahey can defend a little bit. We know that he can shoot threes when not shooting volume. He can pass. He can do, he can kind of flirt with a triple-double. Like when he was at Rutgers, he did some things. Moses Wood, who transfers in Portland. Moses Wood played for forever programs, basically. 15-point per game score at Portland. Like he's going to come in here. He's going to shoot threes. Huskies have ill shooting for the last couple of seasons, which has plagued us. Woods here. He's going to be able to shoot some threes for us. 41% three-point shooter. Yes, please. Xavier Wheeler. Remember what I said. Kentucky to Washington pipeline is open. Quade Green, Keon Brooks, Xavier Wheeler. Keep them coming. Those freshman class that Kentucky has. Like one of those guys inevitably doesn't play and ends up leaving. Come on up to North Seattle, brother. We're ready for you. Xavier Wheeler, though, we know not the best scorer in the world, although he did shoot 37% last year. And from long range, that's a big deal. But a big passer, great facilitator. If he can stay healthy, running the offense, keeping the usual panic out of the building from what our guards normally do when we have these young guards panicking. Anthony Holland comes in from Fresno State. Anthony Holland, 39% three-point shooter, can defend a little bit, mainly just going to be a role player, but he's going to come in there. He's going to hit some threes for us. Nate Calmes transfers in from Lamar. Nate Calmes, he's not going to be probably too relevant just yet. A 37% three-point shooter last year for Lamar. Shooting. We love it. We are bringing in some weapons here and guys who can shoot the ball. That is always a good thing. And Calmes has a ton of talent, somebody who, might struggle initially in a transfer up situation, but somebody who can definitely contribute. I think there will be times in the non-con where we can probably use him. He was Southland Freshman of the Year, so clearly talented. Big deal. We'll see how that works out. Nebraska transfer Wilhelm Breidenbach hasn't really worked out for him. He hasn't stayed healthy. He can rebound a little bit, just a role player. Frank Kepnong, hopefully a healthy Frank Kepnong, somebody who can rebound really well, can block shots. He's back. That's it for the transfers. And then the other center that's coming back, Braxton Mia. So we have a couple of 7-footers there between Kepnong and Mia. Once Kepnong went down with the injury, Mia picked up, had some really big games, 71% shooter from the field. A lot of, when you're dunking and getting layups, it's pretty easy when you get those high percentage shots. So we got those guys back. Keon Brooks comes back, somebody who can definitely be a conference player of the year type candidate. Needs to work on his 3-point shooting, 28% last year, not great. Did score 18 points a game, 6 rebounds, a big time fantasy asset. We know that playing with Severe Wheeler, that has the potential to be really, really fun. The only other real returner from last year would be my guy Corin Johnson, who showed flashes of being somebody potentially great for this program. Now, he had to play sooner than they wanted, but he showed that he could handle it. That kid is a winner. That kid is somebody who we were using him for like 3 straight weeks until his price corrected. If he gets minutes, I don't know if he'll get bounced from the starting lineup, initially, or if he's going to earn the starting spot, but he's going to be a regular fantasy asset for us. And I don't think it's going to be a situation where he's putting up 40s and crazy stuff like that. It's just going to be like, hey, Corin Johnson hit 4x again. Hey, Corin Johnson hit 4.5x. Hey, guess what? Corin Johnson, he just hit 4x again. It's going to be a really safe option there. So we'll see how the pecking order shakes out. But I'm a big Corin Johnson fan. I do think he stays like the entire 4 years, possibly 5. You know how it goes nowadays. And he's going to be an all-timer. I'm really, really excited about that kid. Freshmen that we bring in, Christian King and Wesley Yates. Wesley Yates we plucked from a hotbed in Texas. He is a very, very fun player. Somebody who I think, they can afford to go easy with him, take it slow. The word I'm looking for here. They have the assets, they have the options, they have the upperclassmen to really kind of just ease him into things. And that's going to be a benefit at the end of the day. But I also think in the little, snippets of time that he gets, he's going to look so good that Hopkins is going to have no choice but to start giving him more minutes. And there's going to be a period where, hey, Wesley Yates, he's not starting, but we're noticing he's been playing 20 minutes. Hey, he spiked 25. Let's get him in there. And suddenly, we're ahead of the curve and he goes for a big game and he's suddenly starting, or, God forbid, Severe Wheeler is injured again or something, and he has to be thrust into minutes. So remember the name Wesley Yates. He's going to be very good. He's not going to stick around the collegiate game very, very long. And I worry about him possibly transferring if Hopkins and they gets fired and they suck this year. But if we have a good season, he'll be around again for us next season. But yeah, that's a really good roster, and it's very deep. Usually the deep rosters, you get a little bit of leery about those for DFS, right? Because they're liable to go 9 deep. If you look at this, like Moses Wood, Keon Brooks, Braxton Mia, Frank Kepnong, Severe Wheeler, Wesley Yates, Corin Johnson, Anthony Holland, Calmes, 8 or 9 deep. There's just Mulcahy, shit, damn, we might have 10 players going. So that has the potential to be a little tricky. And I think what we do there is we just let pricing kind of decide for us. Like, we're probably not going to need to pay like $9K for Keon Brooks if it comes to that. Remember, we're starting to balloon towards the end of the year. Unless there's injuries, we can afford to play, like a Moses Wood at 5K, where he's going to take that Cole Badgema role. Cole Badgema was just supposed to defend a little bit and hit threes. And he just couldn't do it consistently last year. And he was getting a lot of minutes, remember, but he'd have games where he just put up like 4 fantasy points. Moses Wood gets to come into that spot. He's much better for fantasy, at least, than Cole Bajema. And somebody's going to be able to hit timely threes. And I would gladly pay $5K for somebody like Moses Wood, who, yes, he's way down the pecking order here, but he doesn't need to do a whole lot. He's going to rebound a little bit. He's going to be able to score. He's going to generate points and get some steals. That's somebody that I can see us using. So we'll let price dictate it there. But this Huskies team is going to be very, very fun. Please, please believe it. All right, let's move on to the Stanford Cardinal. Another team or another coach on the hot seat there, and Jared Haas, who's been there 8 years. Pretty wild. Harrison Ingram off to North Kakalaki, Michael O'Connell. Those are the 2 main departures. They do bring in a freshman class that has some power. Now, Haas is similar to Lorenzo Romar. Like year in and year out, he brings in talent. He wins the freshman recruiting. He continues to stay employed because he keeps bringing in these talented players. That's basically all that is he keeps on bringing them in. And this year's no different. Brings in Peja Stojakovic's kid, Andrej, and yes, he is a lethal 3-point shooter, just like his pop. Somebody that we're going to be able to utilize. I don't know what to expect for his other stats. I know he's going to score and score often, but I'm not all in on him like I think some other people are. I do like the kid from out of Overtime Elite, Cannon Carlisle. He's somebody I think has a pretty complete game. I'm really intrigued to see what kind of minutes he might get early on. I do think that Stanford's in a nice position because they're also a veteran-laden team that can afford to not throw Carlisle and Stojakovic right into the fire, although they're both talented enough to where they are going to need minutes. They can't just, not play. But Haas is going to be able to rely on his depth. And inevitably, there's going to be a game Stanford comes up against where Stojakovic, maybe he does fold, or maybe Cannon's just not ready. And you're going to be able to turn to these upperclassmen who, they haven't won a lot of games together necessarily, but they've been in a position to handle these late game situations. They know how to play, a late game situation defense. They know how to hit shots. They know how to run the offense. Like, that's going to be important. I think Stanford does improve a little bit this year for what it's worth. They did go out and get Jared Bynum, grad transfer from Providence as well. Jared Bynum, we know, struggled with health, but he can score in bunches. He can get hot. He's very streaky. The jitterbug out there, but we know how good Jared Bynum can be. And I do like him. I like the idea of him in the Pac-12 and Pac-12 games. Big East is tougher than Pac-12. I don't think anyone will argue that. So I do feel like Bynum comes to the Pac-12 and maybe, even though he's a smaller player, I think he probably bullies his way around some of these teams. They do bring back Michael Jones, 3-point shooter, primarily. Spencer Jones, another 3-point shooter. Brandon Angel, who's a guy I really like. Finally, he's a senior. He's going to get his time to shine. But Brandon Angel, as a starter, shot almost 40% from long range, 9 points, 5 rebounds. He's a very sneaky fantasy asset because he's always cheap. He doesn't put up 30s, but he gets that 4.5x, and he does enough. They bring back Maxime Reynaud, the 7-footer, 8 points, 7 rebounds a season ago. They also have, for depth, Max Miro and James Keefe returning. Those guys both had times last year where they had to be injury replacements. And when the pricing got tighter and we needed some value, we did find ourselves using guys like that, but they're both kind of mediocre. 4 points, 4 rebounds, whatever. You're getting 10 fantasy points from those guys. But that's the roster in a nutshell. I think they're going to be improved. I really honestly do. Jared Bynum, this is his 6th year of college, by the way. They're just so veteran laden that there's going to be games that they gut out, or that this is a team right here. Like, look at this roster. Like, who's going to the NBA from this group? Jared Bynum, Michael Jones, Spencer Jones, Brandon Angel, Maxime Reynaud. Like, probably no one, right? Like, they'll get an opportunity or a tryout, but none of those guys are going to be going to the NBA as first-round picks. They'll play USC, who has first-round picks on it, but Collier, Young, Bronny James, Young, like, this is what I'm talking about. With you got to have veterans in college to win. These guys are definitely going to be able to go up against more talented youngsters, but they know the collegiate game a lot better, and that in turn it gives us an edge because hey, yeah, Isaiah Collier's amazing, but he comes up against this veteran Stanford team, and man, they really locked him up. He was 35% owned this week because he's coming off a 60 last week, but he only scored 18 fantasy points. I went ahead and rostered Jared Bynum for 5% at 5.8K, and he put up 40 today. So, it's nice when it works out like that. Just an example, just kind of telling you where I'm at with this Stanford program. I certainly think that they're going to be fun at times too. Andrej Stojakovic, that'll be a fun one. He'll probably be chalky from times just because people know the name, but he can shoot the absolute piss out of the ball. So he's going to get a ton of opportunity. Like I said, I just don't know how many other stats he's going to contribute right away, and I'm not sure what they'll do with his price initially. So that's something to kind of be aware of. All right, Utah Utes moving on here. Craig Smith in his third season already. Time's just flying. Marco Anthony gone. Lazar Stefanovic is gone. Those are the key losses. We know Stefanovic is off to the UCLA Bruins. Another couple intra-conference transfers here. Lawson Lovering from Colorado. Mentioned him briefly a bit ago. Transferring here to Utah. And Cole Bajema from my Huskies transferring in as well. They also have a JUCO kid by the name of Hunter Erickson. So the Utah, like I've seen some publications, they're putting Utah like above Washington and above Stanford. I don't know that I personally feel like that as far as fantasy purposes go, which is why you're even here in the first place. This group just doesn't do it for me. Brandon Carlson, we know how talented he is. He got really expensive. A couple years ago, he was a really nice asset because he was always cheap. He got super expensive last year, had some really big 40s, averaged 16 points a game, 7 rebounds, shot about 34% from long range as a 7-footer. That's really not bad. He just got to a point where he was so expensive after a while, it didn't really make sense to use him. And he had a lot of games that just, he put up 30 at 9K, but it just wasn't enough, right? Real good rates, 7% block rate, 29% shot rate, 27% usage rate. Again, shot about 34% on volume, 124 attempts for a 7-footer. So he's out there shooting. Got himself to the foul line a decent amount, 5 fouls per 40. So he's definitely somebody who is going to be the flagship option on this roster, but he's just going to be expensive from day one, and I just don't know that the upside is there. But they did a nice job surrounding him with shooters. Bringing in Cole Bajema, who again, he's meant to be a role player and shoot threes. So that's what his role will be here. 36% 3-point shooter last year. Gabe Madison is back, shot 37% himself. Rolly Worcester is there. Not a great 3-point shooter, but a good facilitator. So having him around, and then they bring in Lawson Lovering, who's also 7 foot. So they'll have a lot of height. I don't know that they can run those two guys together. I guess they can a little bit because Carlson can step out and hit 3, so they can kind of move him to the 4 perhaps and allow Lovering to kind of man the middle. That's an interesting lineup. I think it'll be a little slow, but it could definitely work against some of those smaller teams. Ben Carlson returns, decent value. He was never above 5K last year. You could talk yourself into him because he would put up these, 5X games at times where he'd have, 18 to 22. Certainly somebody to potentially look at. But the rest of the bench, man, it doesn't do a whole lot for me. They do also get Devin Smith from Georgia Tech as a transfer, but he's one of the ones that needs a waiver. And during my notes earlier today, before coming on, I didn't see that he got a waiver yet. So apologize if I missed that. But there are several players throughout the country who need waivers, and he was one of them. 8 points, 5 rebounds per game. There were times last year, though, where Smith had some really nice 30, 35 fantasy point games. So he's somebody that if they need him to have a waiver, because the rest of the roster, like I said, outside of Ben Carlson for the bench, leaves something to be desired. Keba Kaida, Wilkins Exacte. Like it got rough last year when you're like, damn, this slate is really stiff. I need a value play. Can I use Wilkins Exacta? those are dark times when you're asking yourself that. They do have a freshman coming in, another almost 7-footer, Jake Wallen. Don't know what kind of minutes we could expect from him. They've already got his position pretty well covered. Now, this is a roster that is a lot more shallow than what we just talked about with Stanford. And that's a good thing because we're probably looking at realistically a on paper 7 to 8 man rotation, but they're probably only going to be playing 6 guys a lot of minutes because this is a really rough one. This roster, like I don't even know how people can put them ahead of my Washington Huskies. And yes, I am a homer, but unless Raleigh Worcester starts hitting threes, this roster to me just doesn't look very good. And teams last year, how disrespectful. When Raleigh would get the ball beyond the arc, it was just like, okay, what are you going to do out there? You're either going to brick it or you're going to pass it off. So we're just going to sag. So this might end up just being the Carlson, the Brandon and Ben show, and they'll have their usefulness. But the Utah team, to me, I'm way down on them. I think they're far below Stanford and Washington, far below California, even, who I'm going to talk about next. I think they're only better than the obvious, which is Oregon State, who's going to be horrible again. Washington State, who's going to be real bad. I don't hate that. And probably Arizona State, who people are also somewhat high on, even though they shouldn't be. So let's move on here to the Cal Golden Bears. Mark Madsen, the dancing fool himself. You got to love this Cal team, man. 3-19 last year. I get it, but they've got some talent. For DF and Mark Madsen plays, has his teams play a style that's really conducive to fantasy goodness, if you will. We'll get into that in a second. But first season at Cal, hits the transfer portal hard. Like they basically clean house, right? Kwani, we loved using him as a value, but he's out the door. Lars Thiemann, gone. Joel Brown, gone. DeJuan Clayton, who had usefulness last year, gone. Sam Alajicki, who was useful for 1 game, gone. So they had to retool. Hitting the transfer portal and getting some, there's transfers and then there's guys who can contribute immediately. Jalen Cone, who transfers in, from Northern Arizona, formerly of Virginia Tech, has that upper tier, P5 conference experience. Wasn't great for them, mostly just a shooter, but had his moments. But he was really good in the Big Sky level, right? Now coming back up to the P5 level, can he do it? He shot 41% from long range last year, 17 points per game, 3 rebounds, 3 assists. Jalen Cone, really like Jalen Cone, somebody that I think is going to be a real fantasy asset, especially in conference games. I think the non-con, he's going to have his moments, but I really think when it gets tough and Cal starts getting into some wars, they don't have a lot of other guys on this roster that I think are willing to just chuck like Jalen Cone. He's going to be really fun, and he's going to be borderline must play anytime he's under 7K. That's how I feel about it, especially in this system under Mark Madsen. Jalen Tyson from Texas Tech transfers in. Now, Tyson's going to need a waiver. He transferred from Texas to Texas Tech, now to Cal. So they'll need a waiver for him. Hopefully that all goes well. Again, I checked my notes beforehand, didn't see that come through just yet. I'll double check again though. Fardaz Amek from Texas Tech, also Fardaz, we know he's got a ton of usefulness. Can fill up a box score, can put up a very high score. He is somebody to definitely look at as imagining that he's healthy at this point. And then Keontae Kennedy, who's the lesser known of the group, the lesser fantasy viable, but coming in from Memphis, Keontae Kennedy, he's somebody who can definitely, fill it up at times. Only averaged 9 points a game, but he did shoot 38% from long range. He's always been like the 3rd, 4th, 5th option, but he has a chance here in Cal to maybe be the 3rd option and have a lot of usefulness. And he is a grad. So those guys all come in. That's a great nucleus of new players. They do keep some players. They didn't get rid of their entire roster. Grant Newell comes back for a year or two after averaging about 8 and 4. He was useful at times. Jalen Celestine, Devin Askew, who is, it seemed not that long ago that Devin Askew was just coming into collegiate basketball. He's technically a senior now. Health issues, but he did lead the team in scoring when he played, 15 points per game. Andy Okafor is back. Monty Bowser's back. So they've got some pieces here. It's a team that I think they'll probably end up about 7 deep rotation by the time it's all said and done. Cal, this will be the first time in several years where we're looking to roster Cal players for our main lineup. I feel really good about this Cal team for DFS purposes. And short rotation has part of it, but really it's because of the way that Mark Madsen, his teams go. Looking at Utah Valley last year, they finished 28-9, but they played a top 50 pace. Nails on defense. Offensively, they were, they had their moments, inconsistency at time, but really, like, look at who succeeded on that team. They were guard heavy. Justin Harmon, Trey Woodbury, Latrey Darhard. All 3 of those guys, could score. Woodbury, especially hitting threes. Harmon, more of a driver. Aziz Bandiago, who needs a waiver to play in Cincy, by the way. High block rate, great combined rebounding rate, high percentage shots, 7-footer. And those guys they produced. They had a shorter bench, and those guys played heavy minutes, produced a lot of fantasy points. We got a taste of them in the latter part of the season. What was it it was the NIT, right? Yeah. Then the NIT, we got them in DFS. We got to use a lot of those guys, and they did as well. So I love the way that Mark Madsen plays, and you look at the personnel compared to last year, and there are a lot of similarities. So Cone should absolutely thrive in this system. I could see Kennedy being way more usable from a main team perspective as his price comes up, and I think still he'll be usable. You've got Fardez filling the kind of 7-footer role there, although he's he can bang, maybe not like Bandiago style, but he can definitely bang. I think we could see a real nice ascension from a guy like Andy Okafor. He's somebody that I'll have my eye on for sure. Might take a little bit more time, but at some points this season, I think Andy Okafor will be a really solid option in this offense, or in this team, I should say. So waivers be damned, and we'll see. I don't know what they're gonna do with Devin Askew. Like, probably bring him off the bench now, right? Like, I would be disappointed if it was to bring Jalen Cone off the bench. We'll see how that works out, or if they can coexist and play together. It's certainly going to happen at times, because the depth of this team is very, very low, and that's great for us and DFS purposes. So plan on us talking about mini stacking Cal with regularity this season. There's really no doubt about that for me. And this is going to be a really fun team. All right, let's move on to the Oregon State Beavers. All right, Oregon State, it's been rough. Wayne Tinkle is in his 10th season, and you really haven't seen a lot from these guys since he got his contract extension, and they made their absolutely improbable run through the tournament. 20-13 finished the season. They won the Pac-12 tournament. This was back in the 2020, 2021, right after COVID. A really big win over Tennessee, handles Oklahoma State. They beat the darlings that were Loyola, and then they gave it to Houston. Like, that was a really good Houston team. They only lost by 6 that year. And granted, Ethan Thompson, super talented, Warrick Alatishier, Jared Lucas, Gianni Hunt, like, that roster wasn't overwhelming by any means. Like, it was good, but they had no business winning those games. And Wayne Tinkle, I hope that when he got his huge extension, he took care of all of those guys, because look at what he's done since. 3-28 following the improbable tournament run, and 11-21. And I don't know that it's going to get better. And the roster itself, it's brutal on paper. And you're one player that you could really build around. Glenn Taylor bolted for St. John's. He's so tired of the West Coast. He went all the way over to New York. And he was your guy. Now you look at it, they needed to hit the transfer portal. Very obvious situation. Like, hey, you got to infuse this lineup with some transfers. You got to go out and get some guys. All they did was get a transfer from College of Southern Idaho, which is a very big program at the lower level, but that's not enough. This is going to be another brutal situation, and everybody on this roster is going to be super cheap. There's no doubt about it. Now, there are some guys who could take that ascension up and be fairly good options. Jordan Pope, Dexter Racano, Michael Rataj, Tyler Bilodeau. But man, it's an ugly roster. It's, Christian Wright, got to get him healthy. I think Jordan Pope probably, with Glenn Taylor gone out the door, becomes the de facto alpha player. So we could theoretically potentially get a guy at like 5.5, 6K, something like that. We're talking K pricing here. Who's going to have usage rate above 30%. Like, that's really a possibility. Part of the issue for Oregon State not being able to get talent is NIL is a real thing, and you got to have a good NIL program. Washington Huskies have a great NIL program. Oregon State does not have a great NIL program. So their best bet is to offer people usage, playing time, opportunity. Like, they should be patrolling the low majors for guys who are diamonds in the rough, or P5 cast-offs who had a rough season or coming off an injury. Like, they should be doing better than they are. So Jordan Pope, really the only guy that I think with any serious DFS pop. The rest of their roster, like I mentioned, Tyler Bilodeau averaged 7 and 4 last year. Michael Rataj shot 37% from long range, plays the 4, averaged 6 points. Dexter Racano showed flashes, couldn't shoot a lick of threes. Christian Wright couldn't get healthy. You do have guys like Casey Beckway who showed flashes in small spurts of having high usage in these small spurts, but couldn't stop fouling. Chol Marial, who is somehow still at the collegiate level, not staying healthy, 7'2" kid. We'll see what happens with him if he can actually stay healthy for once. Jaden Stevens and Justin Rochelin, both freshmen who didn't play a whole lot last year. Those are guys who are going to be thrust into bigger roles. It's a real rough roster. I think the outside of Pope, like I don't have much faith in Wright and Nakano myself. Outside of Pope, I think the guys we want to really look at here for DFS betting purposes are going to be the frontline guys. And I think one of Michael Rataj, Tyler Bilodeau, or Casey Beckway does end up emerging and having maybe like a Wari Thalatishi type season where, hey, he's had 7, 8 rebounds, scoring 10 points. Maybe he's got a couple blocks. Like, somebody out of that group will become a usable fantasy asset, but it's real ugly for the boys there, the Beavers in Corvallis. All right, next team here, Arizona State. Bobby Hurley. The other Hurley, the non-championship winning as a coach Hurley. This ASU team, it's interesting because they got talent again. DJ Horn's gone off to NC State. Desmond Cambridge gone. Devin Cambridge gone. Warren Washington gone. But he brings in Zane Meeks from San Francisco, who was a pretty good player at the WCC level. Sean Phillips from LSU, who has, hype from coming out of high school. Couldn't really get it going. Bryson Long, transfer from Houston Christian. Adam Miller, transfer from LSU, Illinois. Always the DFS community wants Adam Miller to be a thing. Might he be a thing here in ASU? Possible. Bryant Celebang from Tulsa, who I do think is going to be really nice in Hurley's system. And then Kamari Lance from Louisville. So they went out to the portal and just retooled. They do bring back Alonzo Gaffney, who, as a value piece last year, came through a few times. Frankie Collins, who the epitome of a non-con hero. You might remember during the first 2 weeks of the non-con and maybe even the first month, Frankie Collins could do no wrong. 30, 35, I mean, putting up big scores. The second conference play started, Frankie Collins became absolutely atrocious and a borderline like unusable fantasy asset, somebody you just kind of like faded over and over again. We started using Desmond Cambridge. We got him, as the posh play of the day a few times. For those that don't know, posh play of the day, that's my version of the sneak. Somebody who's going to be lower owned that we're high on. But Collins, I think this year as the guy, second year as the guy, basically, will be much better, much more consistent. So I think he'll emerge from the non-con hero role. But for the non-con this year, he's going to be awesome. So Frankie Collins coming back is great. Jemiah Neal, who showed some flashes towards the end of the season, he returns. But basically, that's it for the returners. So a lot of new faces is a team that's going to have to gel in a bunch of different talent to see how it's going to work out. Bryson Long, the Houston Christian kid, big time scorer, 42% 3-point shooter, averaged 15 points per game, but that was at Houston Christian. So we'll have to see if that translates. He's going to be a kind of a gunner off the bench, I think. Now, Houston Christian, not a program that cares about defense, at least under Ron control. Plays a fast pace, conducive, like let's outscore opponents, but also let's not defend at all. Like they gave 105 points to Missouri, 90 to Western Michigan, like just pretty rough. But Bryson Long, amazing percentage at 3-point range, especially in conference play. But I think they'll rely on him a bit. I think he could probably rise up to the level of being a fantasy asset, but he's going to be coming off the bench at first. I think Brian Celebang is somebody to steal a word from Rothstein, buy stock now. I think there is a litany of forwards here and post players between Zane Meek, Sean Phillips, Gaffney, Kamari Lands, that could get in the way. But to me, Celebang is the guy that I think emerges there. Now, he came from a pretty rough program. So from one bad program to the next, with Tulsa last year, they won 5 games. But Celebang, 35% combined rebounding rate, drew 5 fouls per 40. Not the greatest shot blocker at the 4, but got a lot of high percentage looks, played the most minutes on the team. Somebody that they can definitely utilize. And looking at Arizona State, when they've been at their best, at least for winning, not only winning games, but like actually contributing to the fantasy community, they've had players in the post that certainly like performed at a high level. Jalen Graham, who I know is hit or miss at times, but at his absolute best, like in this program, he was an unfadable fantasy option. Marcus Bagley, before the injuries and this and everything else under the sun, he was really good his first couple of games. Romello White, loves me some Romello White. Really strong games, double-double type games in this ASU system. And Romello White probably Celebang probably profiles a lot like Romello White. So I think he has a lot of success for this ASU team, somebody that I'm really looking at. Last year, he averaged 12 points, 9 rebounds, almost a double-double, but somebody that I think should certainly be able to slide in there and probably start from day one. Other guys, Jemiah Neal, Kamari Lands, some of these other guys, it's going to be kind of a wait and see type of approach there. I think it's a lot of just fading each slate. I think we're going to be talking about, this guy doesn't really do it for me. This guy doesn't really do it for me. We'll see if Adam Miller gets his waiver. But this ASU team, they're going to be a dumpster fire, but they'll have fantasy viability coming out of here. And it's going to be basically just like last year. They're going to be a tough team to bet on. They're going to be a tough team to watch, but they're going to have guys that you can roster here and end up with an optimal lineup. So Brian Celebang, you are the top option for us coming out of ASU. Last team here before we wrap up, Washington State Cougars. DJ Rodman takes off. We know that. He's headed off to USC. A lot of intra-conference transfers. Justin Powell, Mo Gay, TJ Bamba off to Villanova. Those are their key departures. They bring in Isaac Jones, a very high-scoring double-double machine from Idaho. So he's going to be somebody they rely on. Jalen Wells, who's a transfer from Sonoma State. If you're not familiar with Sonoma State, I won't penalize you, but he did average 23 points a game for them. Joseph Yosefu, who transfers in Kansas. Now we know Yosefu, he can score with the best of them as well. Never really got the opportunity for Kansas except for injuries, but he can definitely score. We know that from his past when he was with Drake. And they also have a freshman coming in, Parker Garrett's from Olympia, not too far. Well, I was going to say not too far from me, but it's a couple hours north or south. Sorry. The rest of the team, Jay Mullins, Andre Jakumovsky, and Kamani Husono. So those are the names from last year that were actually at times relevant for DFS purposes. Jay Mullins, I think, is going to step into a higher usage role. 43% three-point shooter last year. I think they'll look to him to shoot and shoot often. Joseph Yosefu comes in with the idea that they're going to allow him to kind of run things a lot. He's going to probably get to take most shots that he wants within the system. But when Washington State needs to generate offense, you're going to be looking at Yosefu as a guy that can do that. You look back, let's pull up the 2021 team with Isaac Bonton. He's going to play a lot like Bonton. His assist probably won't be like that, but he's definitely somebody who's going to be a higher usage guy and has the green light and is going to generate offense for others. You look back to his 2 seasons with Drake, especially his sophomore season when he went to the tournament. Never been a high assist rate guy, but he shot 40% from long range, had a high shot rate, 29%, usage rate over 26%, had a high steal rate, did a lot of things like Bonton outside of the assist, but they had profile a little bit on the same for their offensive game, at least for scoring purposes. So I think we see that version of Joseph Yosefu, and there's potential for him to be really, really cheap here coming out. Jakumovsky, there's real value there. He's about a mid-30s shooter. Health, the concern. Isaac Jones is the one that I think kind of holds the key here. I'm not sure if he can step in from Idaho, a Big Sky team, and have the level of success that he did have. Now, Idaho, one of the worst defensive teams in the country last year, won 10 games. That was no fault of Isaac Jones. One of the top block rates, 4%, shot almost 30% from long range. Granted, he didn't have a lot of volume, but he did take double-digit three-pointers. Usage rate high, shot rate high, rebounding rate almost 40% combined. So he was out there doing it for Idaho. And I think we've seen in the past, obviously with Washington State, they've had post guys who have actually succeeded in this program and been very, very good for fantasy purposes. So I do think Isaac Jones is somebody that I want to keep an eye on and somebody that I think we're going to be able to use. This team worries me from the standpoint of there's a few players that are going to want to be higher usage guys. I think there might be some chemistry issues. I think there's going to obviously be some continuity issues. But I think from game to game, we might see where, Mullins kind of gets frozen out. We might see a game where Jalen Wells decides to chuck a bunch of shots. Yosefu's going to take a bunch of shots. So that worries me a bit about how they might cannibalize each other. Because I think Kamani Husono is somebody that needs and deserves more minutes. We saw him at certain parts of the season be a guy like, hey, that guy could start. That could be like Wazoo's alpha player. So I'm hoping his growth doesn't get stunted here. And he's somebody that they're going to be able to look to and we can actually use. Because I don't think anybody within this Cougars team is going to come out super high priced. Yosefu for Kansas last couple of years has been a min price or basically min price option. Clearly, he's going to be more than that here for Wazoo, but I don't know that they'll adjust it right away. And I think we might get all of these guys really, really cheap. I just hope that Yosefu didn't get ruined the last 2 years. That's the main thing. Jalen Wills, Division II, they've had success with pulling high usage scorers like that out of D2 JUCO level before. So I do think he's an interesting prospect as well. There's just going to be that thing where we got to see guys transferring up. Sometimes tend to struggle, some don't matter, but I want to temper our expectations on a lot of these transfers and really just play it a little bit safer on guys like Jalen Wells, who may have high usage at the beginning, but also might be super inefficient and really struggle at times. But I like this Washington State team. I think that they've got some definitive options that we're going to be talking about, and they are a team high on the list for bust potential as well. Though, make sure you keep that in mind. There's no doubt about that in my mind. So that is the Pac-12 preview. Let's have a prediction here. So I'm going to fall in line with the media. I'm going to pick Arizona to win the conference in its final year. I will have Colorado number 2. Number 3, the Washington Huskies. I know, let me have it. 4, USC, probably the lowest on them. 5, Oregon. 6, Stanford. 7, UCLA. 8, California. 9, Utah. 10, Washington State. 11, Arizona State. 12, Oregon State. So that is my order of finish for the Pac-12 teams in their last year. I think the newcomer, I'm going to give some of these awards too, because I was thinking about this before, and I want to do this for each conference so I can kind of go back and see, like, did I whiff it? Newcomer of the year, I think, got to go with Caleb Love. I don't know. He's just the kind of like the super interesting player that you want to root for. I don't. Maybe I'm in the minority there, but like I want to see Caleb Love do well. And I feel very passionate about Caleb Love, and I want to see him, turn in a big season. So I think he does, and he's the newcomer of the year. As far as the player of the year, there are several options here, and I've seen I've seen some publications pick Boogie Ellis. I've seen some publications pick Omar Balu. For me, I wanted to pick someone in Colorado, but I don't know that I can pick the freshman to be the player of the year. So for me, I got to go because I think the Huskies make the tournament this year, and if they do, you got to give it to Keon Brooks. He'll be a big reason why. So my Pac-12 player of the year is Keon Brooks. I know I'm probably going to look like an idiot when the end of the year happens, but I got to do it. Coach of the year, I got to go with Tad Boyle because I honestly, even though I pick Arizona to win, I think Colorado is a squad. I think they're an absolute squad this year and somebody that has to be taken seriously and somebody that can absolutely win the conference running away. Guess that takes us to defensive player of the year, right? To me, there are a couple of defenders here, but the guy that gets 7 steals in a game, then he gets 8 steals in a game, and so I got to say Kobe Johnson of USC. He's just a nut on the defensive side of the ball. First team All Pac-12, Keon Brooks. Come on, how could I not? I do think Omar Balu belongs there. Boogie Ellis belongs there. And then this is where I'll go with the Williams kid for Colorado. I think Cody Williams he's going to be an absolute just monster in his first season. And then N'Faly Dante. That would be my first team All Pac-12 All Conference picks, guys. And then as far as let's do a breakout player. That's what I'll do for each of these conference previews. So a player that last year, wasn't like heavily involved or didn't put up a huge amount of stats. Like I can't sit here and be like, oh, breakout player is going to be Keon Brooks, like something like that. So for me, man, I should have had a guess for Pac-12. So I'm going back to my Huskies, Corin Johnson. Like I just feel Corin Johnson is such a big time prospect, somebody who has shown with minutes how good he can be. Now, I know there's a plethora of other guards here, but Koren Johnson's just like, I truly believe he's going to be an all-timer type of player. And I mean, are we to believe that Sahvir Wheeler is going to actually be healthy for a full season? And what if Sahvir Wheeler goes to a point where he is healthy, but he just can't score? Like, yeah, it's great. He's a good passer and he can defend, but if you got a guy out there that can't score at all at the guard spot, it's really tough to have him out there. So Koren Johnson, breakout player of the year. Man, he's going to be awesome. Just trust me when I say he should have been a 5-star, should have been award winner for everything out of high school, had some injuries late in his high school career. I'm really excited about him. I think he's going to be awesome. So that's my pick there. Let me give you guys we'll finish up here because I know that I don't want these to run too long. We'll give you an outline of what the rest of the week's going to look like. I have a guest for the ACC. Like I said, I'll potentially have a guest for one other show this week. Let me just pull up come on. All right. So Monday night, we're going to do Big 12, Tuesday night, Big 10, and then Wednesday night, ACC. Same format. I'm going to go through, talk about the rosters. At the end, I'll give my award, predictions, and we'll go from there. But mainly just want to use these as a way to give you names to be aware of with the season coming up so that when they pop up, you're not like, oh, what's this guy all about? Oh, I don't know this name. Whoa, when UCLA has him now? So I want you to mainly just have that knowledge and be prepared so that you're already ahead of the curve. You know what to expect, and you're good to go. And we're raining down green screens on our opponents. Thanks to those of you who watch live and on demand for these shows. I appreciate your guys' continued support. Without that, this would not be possible. You can see the banner in the back change to the CBB Super Show. I love it. Hope you guys love it. We'll see you guys tomorrow night, same time, same place.